Howdy, historians. Welcome to Africa Part 5, Central and Southern Africa. We're going to lump these two together because although they have different climates, their culture is impacted by some very kind of similar things. So you'll see. We'll lump them together. All right, first, of course, we start with our regional map. So we are looking at the pink for Central Africa and the red for Southern Africa. For the Central Africa, Chad, the Democratic Republic of the Congo are going to be a couple of the big ones there. Central African Republic, what else? Gabon, Equatorial Guinea. All right, these are some of the more well-knowns. When you're in South Africa, Southern Africa, the big one to know is South Africa, the country of South Africa in the region of Southern Africa. Little tough, right? But you guys can figure it out. Botswana's down there as well. So those are a few well-known countries in those regions. Now it comes to geography. There's some interesting impacts. So Central Africa is dominated by rainforest and the Kingdom of the Congo, but the Congo rainforest is huge and very dense, very thick. So Central Africa as a region is dominated by rainforest. There's some humid savanna, but it's a lot of rainforest, which makes Central Africa very, very isolated. The rainforest makes it almost impossible to trade and move around and to get through. So they're very cut off. They're very isolated. They'll eventually be victims to some of the worst imperialism that we'll see out of any country in Africa. Eventually, basically the entire continent is going to be taken over by European powers. In this process of African imperialism, which we'll talk about in section 2, we'll see lots of very bad, very brutal imperialism in Central Africa. And a lot of this because they had diamonds. But very isolated because of the rainforest. So then South Africa, their geography is interesting. They have very rich farmland. So they have some of the best farming conditions on the continent, but they were very cut off from the rest of the continent because they're right under the Congo rainforests, right? So the rainforest kind of cut South Africa off from everybody else. So they were also relatively isolated, and they will also be hit very hard by imperialism. They'll have the longest lasting impacts from imperialism when the Dutch come down and then eventually establish the apartheid. So we'll see some very big impacts from imperialism in these regions, but we also see their geography being negatively impactful, right? The central region is cut off because they are isolated in rainforests, and then the south is cut off by the rainforests of the central region. For trade, well, there's not going to be a ton of it, right? Because again, they're relatively cut off. Central Africa did some trade with East and West Africa, not a lot, but they did some. South Africa did some trade with traders from the Middle East or India who made their way there by boat. But there's not a lot of impact from trade because there just wasn't that much going on. It was relatively few and far between for the trade routes that were connecting because, again, rainforest is just so difficult to be able to move through. So it kind of cuts both regions off from trade that other areas were able to enjoy. When it comes to religion, just grab this map here. Just want to get it to the front. There we go. When it comes to religion, we see lots of Christianity. All right, this is just kind of an interesting map too. So Christianity is in the purple. You have Islam in the green. There's some pockets of Hinduism on some islands here off Africa's east coast. It might be hard for you to see through the screen. And then you've got the folk religions, more of like the tribal polytheistic religions. You can see they're mixed in some areas, right? So lots of diversity in East Africa. Very Islamic in North Africa, Central and South Africa, very, very Christian. So Christianity is the predominant religion in this area. So the geography has a huge impact, and eventually imperialism will have a huge impact on the cultures and civilizations of Central and South Africa. So the next thing we'll start to do is look at some powerful ancient kingdoms that were present in Africa throughout the continent in lots of different regions. Look at Nubia and Ghana and Mali and Senegal and Axiom and Ethiopia. We'll look at a bunch of different powerful kingdoms. And then in section 2, we'll start to look at how all these kingdoms, all these regions, all these countries are eventually taken over by European powers through the process of imperialism. So great job today. We'll see you next time when we talk about powerful African kingdoms.